Yobe, look at you big. Oh, he big. Alrighty, everyone, hello, and welcome back to yet another episode of my nonsense, and apparently also a little something of Belock's nonsense, as always, every time. Gotta sit back a little bit today, but today I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the psychological benefits, you could say, of witchcraft. Because, like, honestly, in this whole situation, we talk a lot about witchcraft, we talk a lot about, like, you know, witchcraft as, like, a tangible thing, as something that, like, gives us real experiences and, like, direct connection with some other that is very clearly separate from us. But, you know, not everyone sees witchcraft this way. And if you've been someone who's been watching along and listening to what I say, have read my books, especially like Where the Gods Left Off and When Angels and Demons Collude, and you're wondering to yourself, why the hell do I like not really experience things as vividly as maybe other people do? We're here to talk about it a little bit. First, though, I should introduce myself properly. I am Sarah Streisand. I am a Christian witch content creator, writer, educator, specifically a writer of these two books right here, on top of the other ones I just showed you. Oh my goodness. And these two books go over a lot about what Christian witchcraft is, what it means, what it does. And the second book especially is pretty relevant to today's conversation because that one explores more now the mystical kind of inner work that happens in spirituality to begin with. That mysticism that is really just, you know, another word for kind of what we're doing in the witchy space. Or rather, we could say that witchcraft is a more experimental, hands-on version of mysticism, if you really want to look at it that way. You're such a man. And in Discerning Christian Witchcraft, one of the things that comes up is, in fact, Carl Jung, who was a psychologist who was very interested in the occult, on top of, you know, all the kind of fun musings about psychology that he had. And one of the most interesting, to me at least, things that he came up with is the concept of the persona and the shadow. And you might recognize that whole shadow thing if you've ever heard the concept of shadow work. Basically, as we go over in Discerning Christian Witchcraft, Carl Jung sets it up in a way where the shadow is where people's kind of like unevolved, like not great qualities live within themselves. If we compare this to Sigmund Freud, because they're kind of analogous, disclaimer, I'm not saying either Carl Jung or Sigmund Freud are necessarily like accurate at fucking all about psychology. Let me get that out of the way. But still, right, when we heard the concepts from Sigmund Freud about like the ego and the super ego and the id, I would imagine the shadow is something like that id, where it's just like, you're kind of not awesome qualities, right? You're not great qualities that maybe you don't like about yourself and therefore don't want to accept about yourself. And specifically, this shadow is something that if it's not properly integrated, as in it's not properly, you know, accepted, worked through, and then retooled to be to one's benefit instead of, you know, a hindrance. Usually people, to protect their self-image, their persona, or rather their ego or super ego or whatever, they would then go ahead and project it out, right? Think of that, think of like those people. I mean, we've all known one person or another. Hell, I used to be this person for a while before I started actively trying to not be. But those people who, you know, they make a mistake or they have some quality that's not awesome, and when someone takes them to task on it or when they recognize it, they start pointing fingers at everyone else and trying to, you know, deflect and project onto everyone else. God, young Sarah was a menace. Young Sarah was not, but that's kind of what happens, right? They project that out onto others, right? They start, you know, accusing other people of the nasty stuff that's going on with them, all that kind of stuff. Whereas the persona is the person's self-image. That's like their idea of themselves. If they think of themselves as this good, kind person and they do stuff that's like not good and not awesome, that creates cognitive dissonance, which is mentally painful and which will cause someone to either fall into some serious like mental health issues, maybe depression, something like that, or it'll cause them to try to explain it away, project it out, blame it on everyone else except them. And one thing that people do a lot in the spiritual space, isn't it, is when they do something really bad, they say, I must have been possessed. Oh, I'm being demonically oppressed. Demons, it was a demon that made me do these terrible things. Specifically, right, Christians like to pull that card a lot. And that's because dealing with the fact that maybe they're not awesome and maybe like the things that they're doing are coming from them, their own desires and their own like actions is a lot psychologically to handle. right? So they project it out. And so when we talk about witchcraft as a psychological tool, it's actually that concept of projection coupled with mystical concepts called cataphatic and apophatic mysticism that actually make spirituality, even if you're someone who doesn't even necessarily believe in other entities at all, really, really helpful as a psychological tool. One thing that you come to learn about witchcraft when you do it long enough, in fact, is that a lot of all of these tools and these things that we use, right, crystals and herbs and, and all these entities that we encounter, right, angels and demons and fairies and deities, God himself, a lot of them really kind of put a face or an item, a tangible thing we can visualize and understand onto abstract concepts that are really hard to understand, right? So for example, love, you might have this concept of divine love, and you might look at angels like, for instance, Jophiel, maybe, or beauty rather. Love and beauty and all these things, they might have to do with angels like Jophiel or other ones like that. Whereas concepts of, maybe more like seduction and lust maybe might come up with King Asmodeus, a demon. And item-wise, we have many items that we have come to create as symbols or use as symbols of abstract concepts like love or lust. Things like in kitchen witchcraft, for instance, vanilla, apples, berries like strawberries or cherries or anything like that. We also might say flowers, right? Roses and all that kind of stuff. Red hearts, or just red in general, the color red. We might also associate, chocolate and other things because of Valentine's Day, which has been heavily commercialized and linked to these ideas. This is all a part of cataphatic mysticism, and cataphatic mysticism is basically just the type of mysticism that uses symbols and images and ideas to try and understand truths and facts about the divine, right? About this great cosmic being that is God that no one can really understand. Cataphatic mysticism understands that whatever God is, if he is, where he is, why he is, it's too big for us to understand, and these symbols don't accurately capture divinity in its fullness, but can at least give us a hint, right? Kind of like looking out at the world through a little peephole. And whatever we see out there, I mean, shit, it's still accurate, it's still true what we see out there, but it's not the whole thing, because we just can't get the whole thing. Witchcraft becomes this tool in which we can engage with these concepts, maybe not in like the ways that, all kinds of our favorite TV shows and movies make it seem, where things are like literally happening and you're literally able to see these spirits the way you could see another person and, anything else like that. Please consult mental health professionals if you are genuinely thinking you're seeing people in other sides of the room. But it becomes this way in which we can make tangible the abstract, in which we can better grasp it, both out in the world and within ourselves, and how we can better focus ourselves on these things. On the flip side, apophatic mysticism is when you eventually get tired of all of these items and tools and things, and you just start stripping away bit by bit everything you can think of about divinity. Instead of saying things like God is love or God is this, you might also think, well, God is not this and God is not that. God is not the father, he's not the warrior, he's not any of these things, because he's all of these things, and when he's all of these things, he is no one thing. When you don't need the tools anymore to access those ideas, that's when you really get into apophatic mysticism. But a lot of people have a hard time with that, and that's where witchcraft is really fun, because it's hands-on, it's tangible, it's crafty, it's witchcraft. You're making something out of it. You're setting up a ritual. You're organizing your space, and by extension, organizing your mind. And when you organize your mind, you can organize your action and your thoughts about your action and your commitment to your action going forward. There are so many atheist and agnostic witches out there, and it's because of this way of thinking of it. Because, okay, sure, maybe you don't necessarily believe in deities, and you're looking at everyone talking about witchcraft saying, well, what the hell? I don't understand, like, I've never experienced this, so what are you talking about? And fair enough, and that's where this understanding of witchcraft really comes in handy. Let me be clear that I do think that deities and angels and demons are real, but I also acknowledge that, as, Jung puts forward, they might also be projections of things going on inside us. That God is something outside us, and God is also something within us, and that God is us, and that God is more than us. Like, all at once. This is the fun of mysticism. Everything is true all at once. There really is no wrong answer. There's only whatever answer brings you to those spiritual fruits, right? Of love and kindness and compassion and justice and all these other things. So as a psychological tool, witchcraft can actually be extremely therapeutic. And it all depends on how you want to organize these symbols and ideas in your mind that it becomes so. If you want to get rid of something, well, how do you get rid of things in everyday life, right? You maybe take out trash outside and bring it far away from your house. It's no wonder that a lot of folk magic likewise has whatever thing you're trying to get rid of being carried far away from your property. You want to ward things away, chase them away, or make them scared to come by. Well, what kind of things scare creatures in the wild, right? Teeth and bones and thorns and poison and all these things. Those are all things that scare away physical threats and can scare away spiritual threats as well. Can put you in the mental headspace to get rid of those things as well. This is actually something in folk magic you'll understand as sympathetic magic, which is like whatever you're doing symbolically is linked to the real thing. That's how a lot of this, especially as a psychological component, would work. Whatever you're doing to, say, a lock of someone's hair that you found, symbolically gets transferred onto the person themselves in real life. When we start thinking of magic in this way, we can kind of take the pressure off of having to have these mystical experiences that everyone online is having and just deal with it as a proper therapeutic experience, right? I mean, like, again, think of what meditation is. Think of what rituals are. There's spaces where you are sitting there without distractions, without your phone, without, other people talking to you, where it's just you by yourself going through a sequence of steps. Kind of like, you're cooking a meal, right? That routine of cooking a meal, especially if you're like me and a lot of your recipes start the same way, right? Of pot, oil, onion, other vegetables, meat, right? These steps that become routine, these rituals that become centering, grounding, right? Helping you kind of get rid of all of these crazy thoughts, kind of helping you visualize all of these pesky thoughts leaving you, visualizing the things that you're concerned about being resolved. All of that helps you psychologically as much as it's doing anything magically, because psychologically you're then able to stop being so anxious. You're able to stop worrying about these things that you're struggling with, and instead visualize and imagine and intellectualize, show the step-by-step through that meditation to overcoming those problems. Witchcraft as a psychological tool is super, super good for this reason, and it's no wonder that a lot of our ancestors did it, because when you're got all these things out of your control, weather and, illness and all this stuff, being able to do some magic, being able to do a folk charm or a ritual or, some kind of spell with certain items helped you to stop worrying over it, to stop worrying yourself, to stop obsessing over it, to instead orient your mind, your psyche, to focus on opportunities to do the things you want to do and have happen what you want to have happen, rather than constantly hand-wringing and worrying and wondering and falling into despair over what could be in the future. For that reason, it is kind of funny. Sometimes, like, when I look at these folk magic spells, I do sometimes wonder, like, is this not all just kind of like compulsive behavior? Like doing these kinds of certain things, right? These kind of compulsive rituals to ensure certain things or do certain things that we have no control over otherwise, right? It's a little bit compulsive, but if you're grounded and you understand what you're doing, again, it can really just be a way to unwind your mind from the negative and instead wire it towards the positive, to really give yourself like a good understanding of how reasonably something would happen. This is why with witchcraft, you don't want to just do like a spell that's like, I want money, because it's like, okay, how? How is the money going to come to you? That's an integral part of making a spell work. How is the money going to come to you? Is someone going to die and leave you an inheritance? Hopefully not, right? You don't want anyone to die for your financial gain. Is someone going to lose their job and therefore you get to be promoted? Is a new job going to open up? Are you just going to find $20 in the road? Where is this prosperity you're asking for going to come from? And when you can imagine specifically what it is that you're asking for, or what it is your spell is trying to do through these symbols and these steps and this slowdown of the mind, psychologically that primes you to be ready to handle it in the real world. Moreover, right, on top of that, if you have some vices that you don't really enjoy about yourself, if you are someone who's pretty mean and pretty rough and tumble and like you want to just work on being nicer, you got options. You can either focus on the niceness, the quality that you want, and therefore go after an angel to talk to or some other spirit representing this niceness. You can ask them to help you build up niceness, or you can go and understand that meanness as some demonic quality. Maybe it's wrath, and therefore, a demon of wrath would be one that you would want to talk to and therefore have removed, all right, or just cast it onto some other and banish it, or work with that demon of wrath to understand how to use it more constructively. This is a big part of Carl Jung's shadow. You don't get rid of your shadow. No matter where you go, when you walk around, the only time you're not going to have a shadow is when you are plunged in darkness in the first place. Wherever there is light, you will cast a shadow. And if you don't want to end up like Peter Pan now here, with a shadow running away on him and causing trouble, if you want your shadow to integrate with you and be a useful part of you, it's important to understand where it's coming from, why it's there, and then how to use the skills that it gives you in more constructive ways. For example, if you're someone who gets really angry, well, maybe you work through that, maybe you get rid of that anger, or maybe you learn when to channel that anger into action, right? Into, the motivation to do something rather than just flying off the handle. Or maybe you learn to reserve that anger for situations where you need a bump of courage, a bump of aggression against a threat, or something like that, rather than just being angry and just holding that all the time with no discernible outlet and no discernible reason for it. This demon of wrath can help you refine it like a weapon and use it properly in certain contexts where wrath is perfectly justified. By looking at magic this way, it really doesn't mean that you don't believe gods and angels don't exist. It just means that you understand the meta behind a lot of the magic. That you understand that as much as you can believe that it is energy doing something, which again, I do believe that there is energy, that there is some outer force like a, God and the angels and the demons and all that. Well, I do believe that exists. I also understand that the force exists all at once within me as well. And that it's this co-creation between this other that is God and this me that has all of these thoughts and all of this, mental kind of gymnasium here in which to organize these ideas. As I said, it's not an either or. A lot of times it's both. A lot of times everything is true at once, and you can look at it this way. But if you don't believe in spirits and you don't believe in anything like that, then you can absolutely just go along with this psychological understanding of magic. You can use this understanding to, again, create basically metaphors and symbols within a ritual, within some kind of space where you can then work out a lot of issues for a lot cheaper than fucking therapy in this American healthcare system. And that's where magic has kind of reverted back to what it used to be for our ancestors, which is a way to access aid, a way to access some semblance of stability when legal systems and, class systems and all these other systems and institutions in the world failed them. So when we think of magic, don't by any means think that you only have to think of it in a Gnostic sense, as in believing in these spirits or anything else. You can absolutely view it in an agnostic sense, in which you don't believe that there are any spirits or anything, but that they make really helpful metaphors and soundboards for you to work things through with. And you can also hold both ideas at once, that they are real spirits, and yet that they can also still, kind of hold on to your understandings of these concepts that they represent. All these demons of certain things, all of these angels of certain things, right? They can help you visualize or put a face to the name, rather, of these certain ideas, even when you believe in them. They can because that's what their stations are. That's what they are in charge of. That's what they're here to teach us in the first place. And so witchcraft stops being this silly, goofy thing to just get a partner or get extra money, and it starts becoming a way in which you can look at yourself, you can look at others around you, and you can start to work through your inner world so that you have more capacity to act in your outer world in alignment with the things you're asking for in your inner world to begin with. That makes sense to me. I don't know if it makes sense to anyone else, but it makes sense to me. So if you still have questions or ideas about this, comment down below, and I will try to get back to them. Otherwise, though, I hope this helps you think of witchcraft in less of just a, goofy, what am I doing, kind of magic, why does nothing ever happen the way I want it to way, and more in a kind of self-discovery, self-exploration, and settling way, and a tool that which can help you psychologically work through a lot of things that you may not even realize are impeding you in the physical reality you live in. Untangle those in the inner world, and you can easily untangle them in the outer world. You know what I mean? You know what I mean. So with all that said, I will see you guys next time for some more good chats, and I hope you have a great rest of your weekend. See ya.